Hello everyone, and it's the Yriel here, and today I'll be reacting to Prince Yriel, You're an Elf Pirate by PancreasNoWork. I highly recommend that you check out PancreasNoWork's content if you aren't doing so already. He makes great stuff. It's both informative and also very entertaining, and there's quite a bit of variety. He's gone into Elder Scrolls, Halo, Warhammer 40k, Warhammer Fantasy, lots of things. And it's always fun to watch. And as always, there'll be a link to the original video in the description box below. Also, if you enjoy watching me react to this, I'd appreciate if you like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps. But without further ado,
You know, for all the talk about pirates and how they weren't actually cool, swashbuckling anti-heroes of the sea, they're still really fun. Yeah, obviously Jack Sparrow isn't exactly historically accurate, but he's still fun. But it's like some people get a perverse joy in sucking the fun out of the subject. Actually, pirates didn't go yar and spoke whatever languages were spoken by where they came from. And
well, it's the same reason why it is that, despite the fact that, realistically speaking, space combat would happen at incredibly vast distances, is why it is I like the more cinematic method that, say, Star Wars takes it, where it's like World War II but in space. Well, maybe not even so much World War II, maybe like World War One to the interwar period. When it was more common and for ships to be exchanging broadsides. It's at relatively close ranges.
also most of them were just suffering from scurvy, and eye patches were only a thing because they wanted to fight better in the darkness of a ship's hold. Whatever, bozo, you have fun being a boring history nerd. I'm gonna go find the treasure where X marks the spot. This joke brought to you by someone who majored in history. If you're wondering where all of this is coming from, it's because it's
Also, while some people think history is boring, it's, in my opinion, quite fascinating because I find interesting not just what happened, but also why a thing happened.
subject of today's video is Prince Yriel Uthanesh of Craftworld Iyanden. I'm coming back at you once again with the best sub-faction of the best army in Warhammer, with its premier special character of all things. And this man is the pirate to end all pirates of Warhammer 40k. He's fought every race in the setting you can think of in the name of plundering that sweet booty, and yet he's got a track record of enough successes and failures to make him an actually interesting character. So get ready to do what you want, because a pirate is free, and Prince Yriel is the best pirate you've ever seen. And yes, I did pick him for a video solely to make pirate jokes. You're gonna have to suffer through more by the time we're done here. Prince Yriel Uthanesh is/was a member of Craftworld Iyanden, and indeed can trace his
It's a good thing I like puns, even the bad ones.
lineage back to the titular Ulthanesh, one of the greatest heroes of Eldar mythology. Yriel's one of those classic type of heroes that was destined for greatness from the get-go. He was chosen to walk the path of command despite being quite young. Now, granted, he's an Eldar, so quite young can be anything from 5 to 500 years old, but the point still stands. While his status as an heir of Ulthanesh is undisputed, whispers abound about his true parentage beyond that. His mother was undoubtedly of noble blood, but his father may have been an outcast from another craft world. Some say he also has the blood of Eldanesh, the other greatest hero of Eldar myths, tying both of those noble lineages together. Others still say
Oh yeah, like that whole thing where a falcon brought a sword forged by, was it Vol, to Eldanesh?
that he has parentage from Kamara, and that his hatred for that part of himself drives him to be so kick-ass. Whatever the case, his ego would put the rest of the craft world to shame, and that is no small feat. If other elves are calling you arrogant, you've gone even further beyond. His first great test would come against the Tyranids of High Fleet Naga, the High Fleet before the one that gave Iyanden so much grief. They started voring maiden worlds left and right, and Iyanden as well as craft worlds Malantai and Idhare rushed to assist. It didn't go so well. The Exodite worlds were not prepared for the Hive fleets, and countless Eldar and their spirit stones were lost. The very world spirit of some of these planets was consumed as well. The Admiral of Iyanden in charge of the battle, one Drech, engaged.
Also, for those who don't know, the Exodites had this whole thing where, if I remember correctly, there's basically a planet-wide infinity circuit on their maiden worlds.
Engaged the Hive fleets to enact vengeance, but he too underestimated the Tyranids. His flagship, the Auspicious Illumination of Eternity, was destroyed early in the fight, and things looked grim. Also, I absolutely adore that ship name. It sounds like something straight from the Covenant, and we all know that ship names in Halo fuck hard. Anyways, Yriel took command after that explosive little mishap, and things got better. Over the course of the battle, he realized the nature of the synapse creatures in the Tyranid hive mind, so he started targeting the big bug ships. Then, because Prince Yriel is equal parts madman and brilliant, he sent boarding parties into the hive ships to destroy them from the inside out. I know that sounds insane, but you can't actually do that. It doesn't usually end well for the boarders, but it can be done theoretically. Tragically, despite the Tyranids ultimately being defeated, the maiden world below was beyond saving, as the Tyranids had finally breached some magical sanctum that held the heart of Lorcan or some shit like that was keeping the planet together. It's a magical elf planet, they're allowed to have crap like that. So Yriel exterminatus the planet in grief and rage. But hey, at least the prince is in the spotlight now. The people loved him. The Seer Council kept trying to rein him in because he was a bit of a hothead, but they couldn't manage to do so because it was them versus the entire craft world on the subject of Yriel. The chief Farseer named Kelman eventually came to side with Yriel as well, and after that he pretty much had his way entirely. Mr. Kelman evidently figured that he might as well humor the guy, and since every time he read the future all he got was vague portents of doom and salvation, it was probably better to go down swinging with Yriel than meekly wait to get stomped by the next major Space Marine character GW was shilling. Soon enough, Prince Yriel was heading a second great conflict against a Chaos Lord pirate named Kelarax, which is a very cool name. And the first 10 years or so of the conflict are kinda boring and formulaic, to be honest with you. The big pirate naval battles you might be expecting don't really happen yet. The pattern usually went like this. Yriel, though not a pirate just yet, is well aware that pirates love nothing more than ransacking merchant vessels. When an Imperial ship was attacked and sent out a distress call to come get saved, Yriel would wait until the attack was well underway, and then suddenly Kelarax's forces would find out that Eldar ships packed quite the punch. When there were no merchant ships to be found, Yriel would drop Wraithguard onto Kelarax's space stations to blow them to Kingdom Come.
Yep, Eldar ships hit hard. They just can't really take a hit, but hey, with proper deployment and use of their hollow fields, theoretically speaking, they shouldn't be taking hits to begin with.
Overall, it was a masterful piece of strategy on Yriel's part, and indeed a textbook example of how the Eldar aim to wage war, with overwhelming force at just the right time and place while the enemy is distracted, before fading back into the stars before retaliation could come. When Kelarax started threatening his underlings with death, they managed to take down a few Eldar ships, but it's a testament to how amazing Yriel is at being a commander that even with this, the Eldar of all people were on the winning end of a war of attrition. Either that, or it's a testament to how bad Kelarax was at his job. Speaking of, Kelarax had a couple of his followers rebel, because clearly whatever his plans were for the warband weren't working out. While the traitors all died unceremoniously, it did lead to a change in policy. He instructed his sorcerers to find out where Iandon was located to finally take the fight to Yriel. It didn't work because the Eldar foresaw he might do something like this and cast a concealment spell across the entire craft world. So in the tradition of...
Also, how would, trying to find and attack an Eldar craft world intentionally really work, considering that, they move?
Every evil asshole boss guy, Kelarax killed the sorcerers for failing him and then started summoning demons to help him instead. Nikari eventually told him where to go in exchange for some spirit stones, which Kelarax somehow didn't know the functions of, and what was left of his armada descended upon the Eldar's home. What followed is known as the Battle of the Burning Moon, and this is where Yriel does just a bit of a goof. In response to Kelarax's show of...
Oh wait, is he the one who defeated an enemy force? But had all the strike craft that were supposed to defend the craft world accompany him, and because one missile got through and hit the craft world, he was exiled.
Of force, he also deployed the entirety of Iandon's naval forces to the field. They were still vastly outnumbered, because this is still the Eldar we're talking about, but this ultimately worked in their favor. Have you ever played an RTS game and try to send your entire army through a choke point, but their pathfinding keeps screwing up and they get stuck on the terrain and each other? That's what happened with Kelarax. His fleet was so huge and so tightly bound together that when the Eldar started swooping in between them at top speed, any
perfect simulation of rush hour traffic when you have one 2 main battle tanks on the field. I'd also say that quite a few old RTSs are also like that, such as, say, Dawn of War, especially when there's infantry involved moving between the vehicles.
return fire the Chaos Forces tried to give would only lead to them hitting their own ships. Once again, masterful Eldar tactics. Go fast as all hell and annoy the enemy to death. That's not to say the Eldar didn't take any losses. When you manage to give an area of space an atmosphere made up of bullets, you're bound to hit something eventually, but overall the battle was very much in their favor. And then Yriel continued showing he had the biggest spirit stones around when he boarded Kelarax's flagship with a whole bunch of Wraith Blades. Once again, things were hugely in his favor. Wraith Blades, you see, are unbelievably strong. They're slow, but they're more or less unkillable from small arms fire, and they hit like a runaway truck. You might not know that from the tabletop due to their steep price making them frequently a cost-inefficient choice compared to other units, but in-universe, point costs don't exist. So Yriel just rocked up with as many of them.
Also, for those who don't know what a Wraith Blade is because what he's showing right now are actually Wraith Guard, who use D-cannons, but Wraith Blades are the melee version of Wraith Guard.
As he could carry, and then they went to town on Calyrex's forces, while Yriel took care of the Chaos Lord himself. At this point, you might be thinking Yriel is a bit of a Mary Sue, like Matt Ward took a break from the Ultramarines to write an Eldar character for once. Which I guess, to be fair, he did write that Iandan supplement, but I assure you, Yriel's winning streak is coming to an end. Calyrex's dying order was to send 3 cruisers towards Iandan. 3 cruisers wasn't nearly enough to deal with the whole craft world, because remember, these things are the size of small planets, so Yriel figured that something fishy was probably going on. And sure enough, as the strike force was whittled down to just 1 remaining cruiser, everyone realized just how badly the Prince had screwed up by not leaving even a single squadron of fighters to defend Iandan. Because it launched 36 cyclonic torpedoes at the craft world. They're slow, unwieldy, and pretty much useless at ship-to-ship combat because of it. But a craft world is, once again, the size of a small planet. It's a lot harder to miss. And while craft...
Oh, that's bad. The cyclonic torpedoes are where you use to crack planets.
Worlds do have built-in defense systems. They're designed for larger ships, and the fighters are supposed to handle the smaller things like this. Even with the complete destruction of Calyrax's armada and his own death, because of Yriel's full-send attitude, he ended up getting the last laugh. 35 of the torpedoes were shot down, but it only takes one of them to hit Iandan, taking with it tens of thousands of Eldar and destroying their spirit stones, meaning all those dead elves got a one-way ticket to the goddess of things best left unsaid. Now, on the one hand, this is patently a massive screw-up for Yriel. But on the other hand, my default plan for RTS games is to wait until I hit the unit cap and then send the resulting horde to bowl over anything in its way, so I can only blame the guy so much. Regardless, no one was feeling much of the Prince Yriel hype at that moment. Even less so when he said that while yes, he felt bad about the souls lost to Slaanesh, it was completely necessary for him to have done what he did and the only way to keep Iandan around. He was essentially channeling the energy of everyone who's ever said God moves in mysterious ways after someone gets horrifically mangled in a car accident or something like that. Only in this case, he was God, and mysterious ways translates to, I do what I want, you filthy peasants. So when they asked him to justify his actions by giving an explanation beyond, I'm Prince Yriel, and then gesturing to his dick, he was outraged at anyone having the gall to question him. He's Prince Yriel. What more need be said in the way of justification? So he just left. Just packed his shit and left the craft world, alongside a rather sizable amount of the fleet. He formed a band of corsairs known as the Eldritch Raiders, and this was where he finally became the king of the pirates. Over the next 50 years, he fought a little bit of everyone. Chaos frequently, but also the Imperium of Man. And oh boy did the Imperium hate him. They just couldn't catch the guy, and all the while he would flip them the double bird as he did donuts around Imperial ships trying to shoot him down. No doubt the Imperium felt he was the worst Corsair they've ever had to deal with, and any Ordo Xenos Inquisitor worth their salt had heard of him. It's never been explicitly
So that's 2 pirate jokes that I've picked up on.
Stated that his secondary banner was a human skull and crossbones, but no doubt he at least had one tucked away in storage somewhere. He even has an eye patch. Kind of. It's a futuristic Eldar one, but it counts. The Imperium tried to turn some other prominent Corsair bands against his and kill 2 birds with 1 stone, but Yriel just ended up absorbing them into his own fleet. I guess when he wasn't riding off the high of his own ego, he made some pretty good arguments. Look, I really blew my load with the pirate jokes in the first paragraph, alright? So don't take the wind out of my sails too much, will ya? After a while, he received a very brief psychic message from none other than that Kelman fella I mentioned earlier. Iandan had come down with a bad case of half a Tyranid hive fleet boring down on it, the other half having a grand old time fighting the Ultramarines. I covered this in my Iandan video, but to sum it up quickly, Yriel, despite his self-imposed exile, still refused to completely abandon his home. It probably helps that he wasn't kicked out, he just kinda left. So he explained to his fleet that he was going home and that they were all welcome to join him, but he wouldn't hold it against anyone for backing down since it was probably going to result in most people's deaths. And as is always the case in these situations, not one ship of his refused the call of duty. Naturally, it's worded as the duty of the craft rollers to their race transcends something as pitiful as honor or self-interest, but come on, no one ever backs down in these situations. And if they do, they show up later anyways. Just once I'd like someone to not step up to the plate and actually stay gone, not reappear at the last minute when things are most dire. But aside from me asking for things that will never happen, Yriel and his fleet flew back towards Iyanden with a vengeance, cutting into the Tyranids like a knife through butter and ensuring that the near-total death of everyone on the craft world was not a total death of everyone on the craft world.
By the way, I'm also expecting that the showing up at the last minute sort of thing is what they might do with Rogel Dorn, considering that, you know, there's two different records of his death at different places, different times. So it's like good chance that he's just still out there, and that reports of his death were greatly exaggerated.
He fought the Hive Tyrant leading the invasion of Iyanden itself, which at some point was retconned to be the Swarm Lord, picked up a cursed spear that simultaneously gave him renewed energy while also draining him of life, and stabbed it so damn hard that the Hive Mind itself felt it. Suck on that, Ultramarines. No, I haven't heard of Tigurius, go away. Of course, it was a rather Pyrrhic victory, given that 4/5 of what was left of Iyanden were halfway digested in a Tyranid's gut. Also, that cursed spear made him a little bit mad temporarily, and fighting the Hive Mind itself in a way probably didn't help matters. And not mad like when he boarded a Chaos Lord's flagship, that's being a mad lad. This time he was just insane and delirious and stabbed his boyfriend immediately after his boyfriend finished professing his love for Yriel. So that's a shame. But hey, the dude who replaced Kelman as High Farseer of Iyanden managed to get Yriel to stick around this time. Yriel argued with Spiritia Iana Arienal about whether or not Iyanden should try to rebuild or go back on crusading, and 3 guesses as to which side of the argument Yriel was on.
Let me guess. Despite losing 80%, like was it 80% of their forces, he wants to continue crusading.
And in the name of all honesty, a lot of the stuff Yriel gets up to is stuff I touched upon in my Iyanden video, like I said before. But again, for the sake of completion, I'll still talk about it briefly. He led the craft world against an Orc Wa and its leader Wreckfist, which is one of the orkiest names around. It was dealt with, though as always at great cost to Iyanden, and was indeed yet another threat that almost destroyed the craft world. Iyanden was also once again almost destroyed by Tyranids, although this time they just blew up the planet they were all gathering around and things worked out pretty well. Naturally though, they still lost a grievous amount of Eldar lives, because of course they did. Primarily yellow in their paint scheme, constantly getting their shit handed to them. Iyanden really is just the lamenters of the Eldar, aren't they? At some point Yriel talks to a Shadowseer, or rather the only Shadowseer that ever does anything, Salandri Veilwalker. Among the thousands of named characters she's apparently spoken to, Yriel can stand proud as another one of them. And she came with both good news and bad news, which is about par for the course for Iyanden. Or anyone in the setting really, but doubly so for these poor bastards.
Honestly, it seems like whenever whenever a Farseer says anything, it's another portent of doom, to be honest. Although, if I remember correctly, aren't the Shadowseers at the Harlequin equivalent of the Farseers? I know that those like backpack things they wear are like big gas grenade launch that cause people to hallucinate, though.
It was all shrouded in symbolism and crap because she's a Harlequin, but it was straightforward enough by their standards. Night was descending on the galaxy, but there was a chance the Eldar Empire could somehow be reborn. Demons would rampage across reality, which in hindsight is the Great Rift, but Yriel also saw images of the Eldar gods reborn, which I'm sure is a plot point that GW surely will not ignore in favor of more Marines. And then Yriel died.
And knowing what GW's been doing, in that hope that you know that plot point isn't going to be ignored in favor of more Marines, is just sign-inducing, because as it's like, oh, there was for example how Gazgul looked like it was going to become a Krork because of all the fighting on Octarius, and then he left to go do other things, and nothing came of that plot point. And, you know, the whole thing of, oh look, Yanid is finally going to awaken, and then and Eldrad had stopped doing the ritual to defend himself from some Space Marines. When in reality, like, if Yanid woke up, wouldn't his death have kind of been moot? Like, wouldn't he have just come back? Because, you know, the whole thing of what Yanid was going to do anyway, like, all the Eldar would be reborn. So it's like, was it really necessary for him to even really do that? Like he could have done it, just wouldn't have meant anything, so long as the ritual actually completed.
dies. Craftworld Iyanden was invaded once again, this time by Nurgle, who thought if he had Isha in the cum jar, he might as well add a few more Eldar to keep her company. Yriel, once again heading the defense, stabbed the Demon Prince in charge of the invasion, and to his credit, he not only killed the guy in charge, but destroyed the entire space hulk he was on. I guess he just stabbed him that hard. But this time it cost him his life, and what was left of the Nurglites launched his body at Iyanden covered in plagues to try and copy Calyrex's homework and get their own last laugh against the craft world. But for once, this doesn't lead to Iyanden losing 90% of the people that live on it, because the Ynnari are now a thing, and Yvraine is apparently very good at magic. Wraithguard secured him because they're just robot ghosts and can't get sick, and Yvraine used the cursed spear to magic him back to life. Then it was revealed that his spear was actually one of the crone swords, and he's good as new again. Nice to see the Eldar get some resurrection shenanigans besides.
Oh, well, that's convenient then. Too bad one of the missing crone swords being held by Slaanesh.
Shoving them into a Wraith Lord. And that's about where Yriel's story is at right now. Really hope that bit about him seeing visions of the Eldar gods reborn amounts to something substantial, and it wasn't just referring to Iniad. I know they both have Y at the start of their names, but Yriel doesn't even like the Ynnari that much. He thinks they cursed him when he was brought back to life, which I don't think I agree with, or at least they didn't curse him any more than when he grabbed the suck spear. But as we know, he's very full of himself, so maybe he just thought that since other people were technically doing it this time, it was completely different. Either way, let's wrap up with do or don't Yriel. For lore positives, he's got some versatility with the situations you can use him in. As you've hopefully taken away from this video, Yriel has been in charge of no small amount of massive battles. The final space battle against Calyrex is even noted as being one of the largest the galaxy has ever seen. On the other hand, he's been a pirate for a decent chunk of his life. If you want a smaller scale battle, Yriel could be heading a small raiding party for a laugh. So whether you want a factional leader kind of character or a more low-key kind of fellow, Yriel fits both roles nicely. And he's about as good as it gets as mythical heroes go, so if that's your kind of thing, go with him especially. He's the descendant of at least one of the Eldar's greatest heroes and wields a cursed spear that can hurt hive minds. That's the kind of stuff you read about in Norse myth. If you like confidence, then you can't get more confident than this dude. Like I said, he's so full of himself that other Eldar are calling him arrogant.
Which is funny, considering that from the point of view of the Eldar, or the insinuation that they could ever be wrong about anything is just a high insult.
Give it 50-50 odds on him being able to make Vegeta look humble if you put them next to each other. He got tens of thousands of his own people killed, and his response to that was to go, "You're welcome, everyone, for not letting it be hundreds of thousands." So yeah, sometimes it's nice to have someone who thinks he's hot shit leading your army. It's very fun. Gives you a lore reason to be a cocky bastard to the other player, and very fitting for a pirate. But he's also not a Mary Sue, because as is shown, he's gotten his shit handed to him in more than a few ways. He was humiliated after that little uh-oh with Calyrex. He has to wield a cursed spear that slowly kills him and did kill his lover. He died. He's got enough failures to balance out his successes, which makes for a nicely rounded track record without just making him look like an idiot who really shouldn't be in charge. And lastly, pirate. What more do you want than that in a character? He's a pirate. If you really need me to explain why him being a pirate is awesome, I can't help you. And as an added bonus, if you're one of the few people that has the Battlefleet Gothic tabletop game, you can even imagine Yriel's piloting your ship, screaming stuff like, "Fire the broadsides, hard to starboard, prepare for boarding." And in fact, however you're using him, you are morally obligated to go yar at least once if you field Yriel on the tabletop. It's law. But in a bit of a break in tradition, I'm going to cover all of Yriel's tabletop stuff in one segment, because there's some bad news I have to share there, and I'd rather just get it over all at once. So, skipping right to lore downsides. Yriel is cursed. You are playing a character whose finish line is almost guaranteed to be a tragic death, more so than even the other Eldar. That arrogance of his can also be a double-edged sword, because no one likes an asshole, and Prince Yriel has on many occasions been quite the asshole. I don't think he's quite at the level of Vegeta or Cetra, where he can just say his name and that's the end of the argument. While yet confidence can be key, he's perhaps just a bit too confident. He has toned it down ever since Calyrex, but he's still full of himself, and that can be off-putting. And of course, he's still part of Craftworld Iyanden. Now they are the best craft world, I can assure you from the unbiased perspective of someone who paints all his Eldar as Iyanden. But it's an acquired taste to be sure. Constantly getting nearly wiped out, most of their citizens aren't even alive, and you have to paint yellow. So as a nice segue into the tabletop, and you can tell it's a good segue because I'm pointing it out, you don't want Yriel if you don't want Iyanden. He might have left to do his own thing for a while, but you just have to play him as Iyanden if you want him as your warlord, or whatever the Yriel Uthanesh regiment will be in 10th edition. Now the tabletop stuff. I saved it all for one go because he is pretty much just an autarch, but worse. He does have 6 wounds, which puts him 1 above the standard Autarch, but beyond that it swiftly becomes obvious his stats do not live up to his legend. For example, the cursed spear he wields that stabbed the hive mind itself does a grand total of 1 more damage compared to an Autarch Starglaive. Aside from that, it's completely identical. No special effects, no bypassing saves, which you would think the weapon that hurt the hive mind would be able to do. Nothing like that. His ranged weapon, which is a laser he shoots out of his eye patch, is...
By the way, I don't really play the tabletop, aside from like 2 times I played with a friend. But I still like to listen to these bits because it's because some of the fun stuff that Pancreas says during these segments.
Isn't bad, but it also isn't great. Strength 6 and AP 2 isn't exactly something you can just ignore, but it's also not going to be bringing down any characters on its own. The biggest and most obvious glaring weakness is that he is infinitely less versatile than an Autarch, who can be kitted out in a variety of ways with a whole arsenal of weapons and equipment to be able to take on any challenge they may face, several of which are just flat out better than what Yriel can bring to the table. Yriel has a singular loadout, and while his price of 95 points is likely going to be cheaper than a fully kitted out Autarch, at least from my understanding of his rules, he won't be doing nearly as much as an Autarch potentially can. The most disappointing thing of all, however, is that he only has 1 additional ability compared to a generic Autarch. He can put more Corsairs into reserve than other warlords. That's it. Nothing to do with plundering the enemy's loot, or even something as small as a bonus on the charge to represent how gung-ho he is. The reason I combined his positives and negatives for tabletop is because he's just so uninteresting as a unit, which is an absolute tragedy. One of the most compelling Eldar characters around, and he's easily the most uninspired of them all on the tabletop. Is he bad? I wouldn't say that. With 5 attacks, he can either lead a charge and take out some chaff, or be used to snipe some weaker characters. But he's just so boring, and compared to the other Autarchs who can have jump packs, fusion guns, and more, he's not even as effective as they can make themselves out to be. I suppose if there's any consolation, it's that 10th edition is in like 2.5 weeks, so maybe Yriel will get himself a rework. He desperately needs it. Generally, I hope everything about the tabletop I just said is completely outdated in 2 weeks. Speaking of, his model's also pretty outdated. What a surprise, something in the Eldar range isn't up to modern standards. He also isn't available for purchase on the web store right now, because of course. You can buy Yriel Yellow the paint, but you can't buy the character it's named after. I guess I shouldn't be surprised at that either. Just ask any Warhammer Fantasy fan about Averland Sunset or Reichland Fleshshade. But to stop my bitching...
Also, I have heard so much about Eldar miniatures not being updated for so criminally long, like some of them not being updated since like 4th edition, for example, or 3rd edition.
That's Prince Yriel of Craftworld Iandon, the greatest pirate to ever sail the 7 nebulas of Syrian or something like that. Yarhar, fiddle-dee-dee, do what you want because a pirate is free. Can you tell I'm finishing this script at 4:35 in the morning? Because I am. The clock just bumped up to 4:36 and I've got a podcast on in the background. I'm gonna finish the video now because my train of thought derailed about 3 paragraphs ago. Thank you as always to my wonderful channel members. You are the Imperial Merchant ship to my Eldritch Raiders, giving me your money so I can keep on going to take more money. I'm not actually a pirate for anyone that may be affiliated with the IRS watching this. If you'd like to support the channel, feel free to subscribe or become a member. Either way, thank you for watching and take care out there.
Now for the ending bit he always adds.
Alright, this is beyond unrelated to the video, but I have a request to make of a certain type of you that's watching this. It's nothing intense at all, and if you aren't a complete degenerate weeb, you can just turn away from the video now. There's nothing left for you here. But for the rest of you who are the scum of the earth like me, I need something from you. I need you to give me a list of VTubers, because I need more ammunition to ruin lore crimes with. I'm not even going to watch them, I'm just going to bring them up on the podcast and make everyone more disappointed in me. I've already mentioned Gura, because goddamn everyone knows Gura. I'm going to bring up Commissar Azura soon. Also, speaking of, I was on the podcast War Games, go check.
So many of those Krakow balls are around.
Check it out, it was very fun. Finally got the VTuber collab I've been dying for, and it didn't quench the thirst at all. I need to show up alongside more of them. And I've brought up Pippin multiple times, because the Schizo Rabbit is the only one I'm more than passingly familiar with. But I really need to bring the tone down more. And you know what, Andy? Yeah, that's right. I know you're here. I know you're listening to this. I've seen you in enough of my premieres that I'm betting you're listening to this. It's coming. The question is when? Am I gonna full broadside the degeneracy in the next recording? Am I gonna wait till you've just about forgotten about it and then blindside everyone with it? You're gonna have to find out. Hal and Eli too, I'm not fucking around. Do you think I am? I told you. I told you with the last quiz. I've lost too many of those things. This is my revenge. You thought more Warhammer Fantasy quizzes was my revenge? That's the goddamn appetizer, you hear me? This isn't a threat, it's a promise, just like I said, goddammit. You know,
So I wonder then, given how he was dressed in that last bit, it if it so when what was his name again? And Emperor, the current and the Emperor of, well, the Empire in Warhammer Fantasy. Because I can only remember Sigmar Heldenhammer right now for some reason. But I just get the feeling that with the way Pancreas' avatar was in that last one, if someone yells, "Summon the Elector Counts," he's just gonna show up. Like, just say it 3 times, and it's gonna be like Beetlejuice. He just shows up. But yeah, that was a fun watch. I hope you guys enjoyed watching with me, and until next time, ta-ta.